Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our Spring 2022 Student Data Privacy Training. Before we get to introductions, I want to start with an important announcement about a professional development opportunity that all of you could take advantage of. And what that is the State Privacy Officer has procured some trainings, some professional level trainings related to privacy and security that will be available to state government employees as well as LEAs. So one of these is the Certified Informational Privacy Manager training, also called the CIPM. This will be available in June at the state office building for 2 days, or in September, there will be an in-person and a virtual option. If you're more interested in the security side of things, which we'll be talking about later in today's training, there's the Security Plus training. This is a 5-day training that they will start offering in July. There will be three sessions at the state office building, and then take it on the road, one session someplace in southern Utah and one in northern Utah. If this is either of these opportunities interest you, please contact the state privacy officer, Dr. Whitney Phillips, and we will put her information, her contact information in the chat, or you can email us and we can get it to you if this is something that's of interest. Okay, let's introduce the team real quick. So, hi, for those of you who don't know me, I'm David Saleh. I'm the Chief Privacy Officer at the State Board of Education. I've been in that role since December. Prior to that, I was a Student Data Privacy Auditor for about 5 years. Currently in the Privacy Auditor role is Katie Chalice. She will be speaking with us later today about the compliance check we'll be doing next fall. And then also John Lyman, he will be leading a session with us. He's the Student Data Privacy Trainer. So for today's trainings, it will just be Utah Student Privacy Team. There's no other speakers. So let's get into our agenda. We're going to start, and actually I'm going to start by giving you an overview of things that would be good for you to know that came out of the 2022 legislative session. After that, Katie, as I mentioned, will be going over what to expect for next year's privacy compliance review. We'll be doing our privacy in play, which is a scenario-driven breakout room discussion where we'll try and get into a privacy issue in a little more detail. And then finally, we're going to end with a panel of your peers that we're going to talk about information security. And this is really going to be something geared towards people who are just starting out. That one, I think, will be a really interesting conversation about information security. So if there are no further questions, I'm going to jump right into the legislative session updates. Yes, we'll have to remember back to January through March. Our legislature passed a lot of bills, as they normally do. None that I'd say would directly relate to K through 12 student privacy. But I'm going to share some that, maybe will have an impact down the road. Ones that maybe say that the board should make some rules which will impact it. And some of these are, I think, just ones that are good to know about the state of student privacy in the state. And they're probably going to be more informational. I'll let you know that. But yeah, let's jump right in. So the first one I have is HB 103 Student Intervention Early Warning Program. So for those of you who are not aware, the state had in the past funded a pilot for an early warning system, which the contracted provider was a company called Panorama. And at first I thought that this bill was going to be fairly benign. It just simply took a successful pilot and said any LE in the state can participate. But then we saw that there were parent groups that were concerned about, this company, what is the information they were collecting, and specifically had concerns around some of the surveys where they would be asking questions of students. Originally, the bill pointed to existing law, what we call Utah FERPA, that pertains to surveys being given on sensitive subjects. We didn't feel that this really got at it because a lot of the questions that Utah FERPA is concerned about are asking students about illegal behaviors, mental or behavioral problems. And the kinds of questions that often appear in these surveys are more social emotional learning, or SEL. So questions asking a student, agree or disagree with this statement, I belong in my school. And that's clearly not getting at the higher threshold of Utah FERPA, but one that parents were concerned about and wanted to make sure that other parents would be notified that this was the sort of thing that was happening, and that if they didn't want to participate, there would be an option to opt out. So that is what we worked on with a parent group and with some LEAs on, was trying to find a nice balance where parents would be, if you were participating in this program, parents would have to receive notice if you were going to administer any of these kinds of surveys. Let them know that the survey is going to be non-academic. It's going to be, again, more SEL. And let the parent know how they can access it and that they can opt out. So this is not something we are currently providing support for, but I imagine in the future, as more LEAs sign up, we can look into assisting with model language for that notice or for that opt-out form. HB 117, Victim Address Confidentiality Program, is creating a program for crime victims who maybe need that extra layer of confidentiality by not having their address be public. And so this creates a program where that participants would be assigned essentially a dummy address, one that differs from their actual address. And then the program would do things like help manage their mail because it would be sent to the wrong address. And so they would facilitate getting it to the right address. Consequentially, government agencies collect addresses on most of its citizens, including schools. So there is a line here that specifically calls that out that we thought you should be aware of. So it says, a school district shall accept the assigned address as the address of record, even though it is not the real address, verify the student's eligibility with the commission that will be running this program, and the commission will also help facilitate the transfer of student records as needed. So I imagine once this program gets going and this commission exists, that we'll get more information on what that should look like. I've spoken with some LEAs and there are concerns, and this is for your awareness as well, about the non-official address collections. They said, sometimes teachers who don't have the address in the SIS, where I assume this would be where the assigned address would live, they might ask students for their home address directly in order to send stuff to them. And so there might need to be some training there on, we don't want government files essentially giving away these victims' actual addresses. So I imagine, again, once the commission gets going and this program is started, that we'll get more information to you on it. HB 230, Refugee and Immigrant Student Policy Amendments. So this does have a little bit of a records creation aspect where it will modify acceptable evidence for establishing a student's age and identity. And then there's going to be a big lift for USBE. I assume it's going to be our IT department, but we're going to create a repository for immigrant and foreign exchange student transcripts. And there are going to need to be certain privacy protections around those because the bill anticipates that qualified social service providers should be able to access this repository for the students that they're working with. And so the law specifically says USBE needs to make a rule regarding protecting the student privacy of that repository. So for right now, this is informational. The repository does not exist. Once it does exist, and once we have that rule in place, we'll let you know in more detail what those privacy protections need to look like. This one's purely informational, but I think it's good. We're going to be talking about security later today. Our legislature is thinking a lot about security as well. That's why they passed HB 280, Cybersecurity Commission. This creates a cybersecurity commission that's job is basically to analyze the landscape and establish guidelines and best practices for government agencies. This commission will report annually to the Public Utilities, Energy, and Technology Interim Committee. So I know that's something I will keep an eye out on and definitely share out what guidelines they are suggesting because we will definitely want to share those out with LEAs so that we are doing the best we can with cybersecurity. And one other one, this is kind of more related to employee privacy, government records amendments. So there's this thing out there called Garrity rights. And, you might just think of yourself as an employer and all your staff as employees. But in reality, public schools are the government. And, our Constitution, the Bill of Rights, provides certain protections from individuals, from citizens, from the government. That's a big part of the Bill of Rights. I think of things like the Fifth Amendment, for example, where you don't have to self-incriminate. This translates into public employees and what are called Garrity rights, which is more or less the Fifth Amendment. A public employee should be protected from having to incriminate themselves during investigatory interviews. So that's already established within our legal framework in this country. What this law does is it clarifies that if you are collecting a statement as part of that investigation of misconduct, then that statement is going to be classified as protected under GRAMA. So that will make it a lot harder for the public or newspapers to get a copy of that statement and provide some extra protection and assurance to that employee. Let's move on to the Senate then. So SB 226, Higher Education Data Privacy and Governance Revisions. And if you look at this law, it looks very similar to the K through 12 student data protection law. So it's basically putting very similar requirements onto higher education. So it's not really going to affect you as much. I think, again, this is a mostly informational one. I will add, though, that it is going to create roles of a higher education privacy officer who is going to assist our institutions of higher education on privacy compliance. I imagine in a similar way that our section at USBE does for K through 12. And also the state privacy officer is going to establish an advisory group related to higher education data privacy and governance. So this one, again, more informational, although I think it is pretty good to see that there should be a standardization from kindergarten, not just to 12, but on into higher education. This one is, again, purely informational. SB 227 Consumer Privacy Act. This one deals with companies that collect data on citizens in the state, consumers. And this one's kind of neat in the privacy world because Utah became the 4th state to pass a comprehensive consumer privacy law after California, Colorado, and Virginia. Now, I'm pretty confident that this one is not going to affect schools in any way because there's a list describing its scope and specifically what kind of information is excluded from it. And in that list, it does say if information is protected by FERPA, it's not covered by this law. Nevertheless, I think it is good for you to know, just as a consumer and a citizen in this state, that there are legal protections, that you have certain rights now that will come from this law. And the last one I'm going to discuss from the Senate was SB 254, Government Records Access Revisions. And this one clarifies that the records of security measures, including risk assessments, are protected records under GRAMA. So you can see that there in lines 40 through 41. So anything that comes from, let's say you had UETN come and review your security posture, those records are protected under GRAMA. I suspect if you look at the existing language, that's not the part that's been added, that they probably always were. So I think of this as probably more of a clarification. And it's my understanding that when LEAs have gotten those kinds of reviews, they have kept them protected. They have not been sharing with them public. Because I think that is really important. It's important for you to know your security posture, but you don't want vulnerabilities and things like that going public because they could be used against you by an attacker. So if there are no further questions about the legislative updates, I'm going to pass it over to Katie, who will be providing our review for next year's privacy compliance check.
Well, hey, everyone. It's kind of fun because well, first of all, can everyone hear me okay? All right, thanks for the nod and the thumbs up. I was just kind of looking through the participants list, and it's fun. I've been in this job for a year and a couple months, and it's fun to start knowing more people's names. For example, I saw that 18018 is here with us, so that's really exciting. Welcome. So we are going to, my teacher brain does not love that we're going to go fast because I would love to be able to make sure that everyone is understanding and that I'm not pushing things too fast. But because of time, I am going to kind of go through this stuff pretty quickly. The people who are going to find this most relevant are the folks who are the designated data managers for their LEA, their district or charter school, or the designated information security officers. And you may not, in my experience, it's more common for schools to not know what the information security officer is. If there's been turnover in the school, you might not have someone assigned in that role. But David will address that briefly in the panel at the end of this training. So let's go ahead and just dive in. Because we're going to be going fast, we're actually going to start with where you can get more information, because I won't be covering everything here. Then I also am going to talk to you guys about the new involvement of information security officers. They haven't historically been as involved in this review process each year. We've also got a new due date for you that I think you'll appreciate. And there are 3 things I want to clarify for you about the metadata dictionary while I have you today. And finally, I want to present to you this pilot program that we're pitching that would, for those who volunteer to participate, it would replace the traditional review that we'll be talking about for the first bulk of this section. Okay, so first, where to get more information. So again, we won't cover everything today, but these are 5 places where you can get more information about the annual privacy compliance review, specifically for this upcoming school year. First is our newsletter. Hopefully all of you are signed up for the newsletter. If you're not, these are some instructions to sign up. It's really easy. And maybe John might be willing to paste a new link to the presentation in the chat if you want to follow along. So in our newsletter, as you know, we'll put like little updates and things, but I'll just know that there will be specific updates about the privacy compliance review. And then we're also going to be doing, this is probably the most useful resource for you, I imagine, on this topic. We're going to be doing a webinar that's specifically about the privacy compliance review for this upcoming school year. And that is going to be held on May 11th, which I know May is a terrible time of year. It's like the end of the school year. But it will be recorded. So if you want to watch it later, you can. We heard feedback that people wanted to know kind of what was going to be required earlier rather than later. And so we're getting that information out to you right away. There's actually, I think there's already a link to the Eventbrite registration page on one of the very last slides of this slide deck. If that's not the case, then you'll get a chance to register in the newsletter. We still have our Data Manager Canvas course. It's not a traditional course. It's not like you have to be added to the course and you don't have to sign in. It's basically just like a collection of pages. And the one that will be most useful to you is this page called the Annual Privacy Compliance Review. It lists everything that you should expect, talks about due dates and so on. And there are a handful of pages that are not current to this upcoming year. For example, the metadata dictionary page, which you can't see on this screenshot, is, so sorry, I just got a text from David, distracting me. So when I get some of that information updated, we'll let you know as well. Okay, and the last thing I wanted to, or second to last thing I wanted to let you know about is that the slideshow will be available to you, of course. Again, John is pasting that in the chat. And then wanted to remind you that there are 3 people that you can reach out to. There are others as well, but specifically on the topic of the privacy compliance review, I'm the one, David mentioned this earlier, but I'm the one that's in charge of that now. And so please reach out to me. If you are using the Student Data Privacy Consortium page as your metadata dictionary, you might benefit from reaching out to John Lyman. He can help you with that. And Madra, I'm not sure if Madra is on the call. She doesn't work for USBE, but she is the customer support manager at Learn Platform. So if you're using Learn Platform for your metadata dictionary, you can also, there she is. Hi, Madra. Hopefully I got your email correct. So feel free to reach out to her if you have any questions on that. All right, just very briefly, I just wanted to mention that information security officers will be involved in the review this year. Just like last year, the data managers will receive a link to 2 different surveys. The first one is just a contact information update survey. It'll take you 5 minutes tops. The second one is the big one where you submit your evidence for the year. But information security officers will also receive 2 survey links to surveys twice this year. One of them, again, contact information survey, and the second will be a pretty short survey about cybersecurity practices. So I won't go into this, but here's some information about the contact info survey. And the cybersecurity survey will be really short. I think it's 12 questions, and you can actually look at those questions right now if you want to. I just want to point out that some LEAs, especially charter schools, have an information security officer that is not an IT person. And if that's the case, you're going to want to get some help filling out the survey, because this is an example of a question that you'll be asked on the survey. Pretty easy to answer for someone who's in the cybersecurity world, hard for someone who doesn't handle that. Okay, there's a new due date. Excited to tell you about this. These contact information surveys are going to come at the same time they did last year, in September-ish. There's not a due date, just get to them as soon as you can. I know it's a busy time of year. These other two surveys, so the cybersecurity one and the one where you submit evidence like we've done every year, instead of having that due October 1st, which was a nightmare, we got some feedback from a bunch of different data managers, and they liked the idea of November. So the new due date for that is November 1st. And then we're open to feedback for future years if you like that or don't like that or whatever. Okay, this is really important. This is probably one of the most important things I want to tell you today. And it's embarrassing because it's a mistake that I made. On the topic of data elements. So this is a list of the metadata dictionary requirements. You need to have a list of the products or resources. Sometimes I've called them data recipients. These are the companies usually that receive student PII. And then for each of those, you're supposed to have a purpose indicated, a justification, the FERPA exception. And in the past, I told you that for each data recipient or each product or resource, you're supposed to list the data elements shared with them. And then separately, there's this like requirement to have the definitions of data elements. Thanks to some people in this group, it was pointed out to me that that is not what the law requires. The law doesn't require you to have a list of data elements for each product or resource. The law says you need to have a list. It says you need to list and define the information shared outside of your district or charter school. So this will make some people, this will like change the lives of some people. Other people will be like, I don't really care. But I just want to make sure everyone knows that you don't have to list data elements for each individual recipient. And I also want you to know that that was my fault, and I apologize. It was my misunderstanding. So let's kind of quickly walk through what this might look like. If you're using SDPC, then you might be currently entering in the data elements for each recipient, right? And it looks like this if you're looking at it in the customized resource listing. Your option, you can continue to do that. Absolutely, there's no problem with that, and that will meet the legal requirement. But you also have the option to just stop doing that and instead post a link to a single list of data elements. I'll show you a couple examples of that in a second. If you're using Learn Platform, this would mean that if you're entering in the data received on a particular product page, you don't have to do that anymore. You can just pause that practice and link to a single list. If you're using the Google Sheet template, you are welcome to hide or delete all of these, I think there's like 24 columns of data elements on your sheet, and then just make sure you have the second tab still on your sheet, because that's where the data elements are listed. So in all of these cases, you can do either or. You don't have to change your practice if you want to keep listing data elements for each individual recipient. That's totally fine. Oh, sorry, I'm going so fast. I hope this is okay for people. The second thing I want to clarify about the metadata dictionary is the definitions requirement. So again, back to this list of requirements, one of them is that you not only list the types of information, aka data elements, that are shared with people outside your district, you also need to define those. For example, if you say, oh, we share student enrollment information, you would need to have an accompanying definition that says, well, what do you mean? That explains what you mean by student enrollment information. And this is actually the one thing that's holding back a lot of LEAs from receiving a pass on their metadata dictionary. So I wanted to show you a couple ways that you can accomplish this pretty easily. First of all, we have two existing lists of both a list of data elements and a list of definitions. So back to those previous slides where I was saying, oh, you could stop entering data elements for each product and you could just link to a single list of data elements. linking to one of these would meet that requirement, both as a list of data elements and as a list of definitions. So 2 of these already exist for you if you want to use them. One way that a lot of LEAs are meeting this requirement to have the definitions publicly posted is they're putting 2 links on their web page. So here's some examples of that. Approved applications compared to the data element definitions. But we also, and I'll just mention Weber, their page has they have their link to their listing of resources at the top, but then down below, they've got this list of data elements and definitions. So that meets the requirement as well. We've recently kind of discovered a way to build in your list of data elements and definitions into SDPC if you're interested. So this would mean you wouldn't have to have 2 links on your web page. And John did a little monthly call about this, and he actually has some pre-built code for you if you want to do this. So just get in touch with him if that's of interest to you. So you can see Renaissance Academy, they're no longer going to need to have 2 links on their web page, because on their actual customized resource listing that serves as their metadata dictionary, they've got a link to the data elements and definitions. Similarly, the Learn platform has, you have the ability to make a custom message below, like this is on the public page. And neither of these that I've taken screenshots of, neither of them currently include a link to a list of data elements or and definitions, but they could. So like Washington and Twila could go in and just add that in there. And Madra from Learn Platform, I think she's in touch with some people about the possibility of making that text so that you can make it a hyperlink if possible. If not, though, you could just put the text in there and just meet the legal requirement for now. All right. Oh, sorry, John, I'm not going to be done by 10:40. I'll do my best to wrap up in the next couple minutes, though.
You're fine. Take your time.
Okay, thanks. If you have the Google Sheet template, then this is already done for you, assuming you still have this second tab. Some of you guys, when you turned in or submitted your metadata dictionaries, you had saved the Google Sheet template as an Excel spreadsheet, which is not a problem. But if you saved it as a CSV files don't allow for more than 1 tab, and so you've lost your list of data elements and definitions. If that's the case, I made a note of that in your compliance report, but you can also reach out if you have questions about that. Okay, for the 2022 school year, this upcoming school year, we're not going to go into this in detail, but I just wanted to let you know, the law says that you're supposed to have a comprehensive listing of everyone that you share data, student PII with outside of your district. That's crazy. Like a comprehensive listing, that's, for most LEAs, that's going to be hundreds, at least of hundreds of either individuals or companies or universities, for example, that receive data. So acknowledging that that is a crazy heavy lift, last year we limited what we were going to check to just a handful of products or resources that we wanted you to have listed. Continuing on that path, we're just going to expand it a little bit more this year. And you can expect, I think, to just see that for the next coming years, that just every year we're going to kind of just prod you along a little bit more, knowing that reaching comprehensive is a big task. So last year, you were supposed to have UTREX, your SIS, RISE assessment if it applies to you, et cetera. This upcoming year, we're giving you a series of options that you can choose from. So when you fill out that privacy compliance review survey, you're going to tell me which review criteria you want me to check you against. So if you want me to look at for some predefined, like, I'll give you a list. If you wanted to do option 1, I'll give you a list of, maybe another 10, probably another 10 of products or resources like similar to this year. And then you could on the survey indicate like, oh, this, Katie, this is the one I want you to check against. So again, we won't go into detail on these, but just know that's an option for you. Everyone will need to do it, but you get to choose the option that you want to use. And finally, I just want to quickly tell you about this pilot program. This is voluntary. It would replace the traditional review. Currently, of course, the review checks for policies and notices. If we kind of evaluate where the privacy practices fit in the spectrum of education, there's educating students, there's within that, there's kind of a sub world of privacy and security best practices. Within that, there's the stuff that is legally required. So there are practices that are good to have that are beyond legal requirements. And then our review that we do is an even smaller fraction of the stuff that's legally required. So it's really a very small component of the broader world of privacy and security. Our new approach is we wanted to change things to make it more personalized and more practice focused. So if you volunteered to participate in this pilot program, your review process would look something like this. We would work with you to complete a self-assessment of your privacy and security practices. If you've had an audit done by UATN recently, like we could build that into part of the self-assessment process. Based on that, your LEA makes a goal. So if there's something you want to work on, you see a need, then you determine that goal and work on it throughout the year with our help if you are interested. And then the review part of it would be that at the end of the year, I would work with the LEA and kind of do a rehash of, or not a rehash, but like a review of how that meeting that goal went. So here's just a couple examples of, we won't go into them, but of things that, I anticipate an LEA might want to make a goal for. And that would take us from focusing just on like that little tiny circle of privacy and security stuff, and rather kind of expand it out to this broader world of best practices. If you're interested in participating, will you please send me an email? I've told a couple people about this, and some of them expressed interest. Others said, yeah, I'd be interested, but not this year, So anyway, it's up to you. It's voluntary, but if you're interested, please shoot me an email and we can get in touch about that possibility. Thanks, you guys. Fun to see you, and reach out if you have any questions. And John, I'm ready for you to take over whenever you are ready.
I guess it would be helpful if I turned on my microphone, huh? Doesn't everybody love doing this Zoom stuff? I mean, we're not the only ones that probably have to share out and run into all of this weird instances. What we're going to do, I know, is everybody's favorite thing, especially in college, is to break out into groups. But I think that this is going to be an important exercise for a lot of us to go through. We call this Privacy in Play. You can see there's this link right here. Maybe some of you have heard the tiny URLs, the short URLs may not work for you. Let us know. I don't know if one of my team can please post this in the chat so that you can get going. But this is an interactive thing. This is a way for us to get you talking to one another, to try to work through different scenarios. And then today, what our scenario is we're going to work on policies and how high-level policies translate to those ground floor procedures, because policies, as we'll see in a second, can be very kind of vague. And so how do we put those into action on the ground level and be compliant and safe and smart with our practices is something that we want to discuss today. So I'm really excited. My background is in instructional design, and a lot of what we talk about is having these ideas of personas, or these different archetypes. And what you see here is we have these 4 different archetypes that we at USB have been working to develop for some of our other programs. But what we have here is Cynthia, our principal, Gabriella, our secretary, Danielle, our teacher, and Maureen, our special ed director. You'll get to know them a little bit more here in a little bit. But what we wanted to discuss here is this is a model policy that I would anticipate that a lot of you are using. This comes from our model documents that we provide to you through some of the model documents that we have on our website. And if you're not familiar, on our USBE website under the Data Manager tab, there are a host of model documents, including parental consent forms and different things. But this data governance model document has in here this, which I will read to you, this data sharing policy. There is a risk of redisclosure whenever student data are shared. The LEA shall follow appropriate controls to mitigate the risk of redisclosure and to ensure compliance with federal and state law. These 4 archetypes are different archetypes within an LEA that work with student data. And so we're going to go through a little exercise where we define certain aspects of procedures that they may need to go through. So let me give you some instructions on how we're going to do this. Some of you have done this with us before, but we're going to work out this scenario. If you are not able to participate, it's 10:48 on a Wednesday afternoon in the spring. Maybe you're sitting at a desk and people are coming in and asking you questions. You can go ahead and join the breakout room that we're going to put everybody in. You can listen in. With the numbers that we have, we're going to have 8 different breakout rooms, so we should anticipate that there will be large numbers in these rooms. So give your group a heads up that you won't be speaking, but that you will be participating. This doesn't necessarily mean with large groups that you can volunteer your way out of participating. We would really encourage everybody to discuss, because a lot of you do play one of these roles at your school, and you will be interacting with somebody that plays one of these other roles at your LEA. If you find, which we don't anticipate, but that someone in your room that your room is not active, then you can always come back and we'll move you into a different room, but we don't anticipate this happening. What we do anticipate is that there are going to be a couple of windows open on your screen. One, there's going to be the Zoom window, which I'm interacting with you through now. There is the presentation that you may be following along with on your browser. But when we start clicking on this link that we've already kind of made available to you, that you'll see here, this tiny link, YXMJTBWC, it will take you to what you're seeing here on the right side of your screen, which is the set of instructions for the activity. So you'll see that there are going to be 2 different browser tabs that you may have to navigate between. We're going to link to the document in the chat. Once you're in your Zoom, introduce yourself to the group if there's time. Find your group's page on the scenario document. So each room, we're going to have 8 rooms. Each room is going to be crosswalked to one of the slides. Each group is going to have one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Please read the instructions as a group, discuss and answer the questions. We're going to kind of be jumping through the room. So we're going to give it about 20 minutes max. If we find that things are kind of tailing off, then we'll pull everybody back in. If you finish early, you guys can leave the room and come back to the main session. Keep an eye out for warnings that we'll be sending as far as how much time is left. Hopefully this is engaging conversation and you don't want to leave, but we'll get to that. So if there aren't any questions, which I couldn't see if I wanted to, I would encourage all of you to get ready to go into some breakout rooms, and I'll be visiting with you in a moment. Okay. You are the data manager or information security officer for your LEA. Based on your LEA's data sharing policy above, what kind of data sharing procedures should be defined for the following folks? Is there anybody who would like to just jump? I was jumping around some of the rooms. I feel like the rooms that were the most vibrant or had a lot of teeth to it, because there was a lot of, the word that we've been talking about in our office a lot is the word visceral. There was a lot of visceral kind of reaction to a lot of this. And some of it was in Danielle's room, in Gabriella's room. Does anybody want to kind of speak to some of the things that they think need to be communicated? And I don't know if we have the ability to unmute everybody.
Everyone should be able to unmute themselves.
Okay.
Or they can speak in the chat, whichever they're more comfortable with.
Yeah. I know that there was some issue.
I can
go ahead.
speak for Group 6. We had Gabriella. One of the things that we talked about was we had some concerns about how she shares some of the reports that she's creating, whether there was discussion about whether it should be done through district supported email, or even probably more secure, like the schools or the district's SIS program, just so that we kind of keep a limit on who has access to data. Mm-hmm. That was one of the recommendations that we kind of talked about.
Okay. Thank you, Jared. I know that and I'll kind of preface this. I know that I would like for those of you that work with SDPC to join our monthly calls. We have them the last Thursday of every month from 3 to 4 p.m. If that's not a good time, I would request feedback from most folks. I know that maybe 3 to 4 p.m. doesn't work for a lot of folks, but in the SDPC world, I know that we're talking about third-party contracts and working with vendors, and this comes to the conversation that folks were having with Danielle, the teacher, and wanting to get approved things and going through and requesting things that maybe have already been approved, or just the whole dance. And we don't want to tell folks no. That there are some tools that we are developing through SDPC to kind of show what is available ed tech wise in Utah currently, as far as Exhibit E's, state contracts, and what we have with I Keep Safe badges and some of these other things that will allow us to get to a yes. There are about 750 different vendors on this list, so please come or contact me after this meeting, and I can make sure that you get that on your calendar. But does anybody have anything to speak to about maybe Danielle and wanting to get access to some of those apps? Maybe what's going on with Maureen? Anybody from group 4 want to speak up? And I can actually switch over to our other. We can take a look at it. Does everybody see this? So group 4, it looks like you guys were talking about how to keep her files and data private safe. So Maureen, for those of you that don't know, is the special ed director. She uses aliases instead of names. Knowledge of who has access to and what information they have access to. The printer.
There might be a couple extras back there, or they're not.
The printer is a great thing for us to be paying attention to, things that come off of the printer. How information can be shared via email, printed documents. I think that, Jared, you had mentioned this, going through. And then don't let students handle confidential information, even if in an envelope. Wow. I don't know if that's something that our team would have come up with on our own. Any other things that we would like to discuss? I know that we want to get to our information security panel, but what we have is, as you can see, is a big document that you have helped us create about these 4 different archetypes that will help us help you create different policies and procedures and help walking. And there's this mysterious little other word that kind of meets in between policy and procedure, and hopefully we can help you with that. And it's called process. What is the process that we are working with? So Mark, thank you for continuing to work on this. I'm going to, let's see, jump down to question 2. I don't know if anybody has anything to share about question 2 about roadblocks. I know that we can take a look at that document when we're done. But unless anybody else has anything to add about our privacy in play, I'd like to thank you. I know that it's kind of a little bit unnerving for us to jump to different platforms and to go back and forth, but I really appreciate everybody's willingness to participate. And it is baseball season, and David does have this Howard Cosell kind of look going on for him right now.
Howard Cosell. Making references to things no one has thought about since the 70s.
That's actually pretty good. That's good.
Yeah, he's got a pretty good voice. Okay, let's move on then to our last presentation, and I'm going to ask our panelists to unmute themselves, and you don't have to turn your cameras on, but you're welcome to. But our last presentation is going to be a panel. So we call this Step Up Your Security Game, an Information Security Officer panel. Now, for those who are not aware, board rule, specifically R2774873, states requirements that an LEA needs to designate not just a data manager, who's the person over privacy, but also an information security officer. It also states that LEAs should implement a cybersecurity framework. And if you don't know what that is, there are a couple of national standards, essentially. One of the ones that's recommended in the rule is called the CIS controls, which is an ordered list of 18 different areas any organization should address in order to better strengthen their cybersecurity practices. And that's it. That's all anything in our state law or in board rule really says about this. And we've recognized that this is an area where we need to be providing you more guidance and more help. It's not just enough to say, put someone in charge and have them do a thing. And so in that spirit, we wanted to speak more on this topic and particularly speak with some people who work with it every single day. So hearing from some of your peers. So our panel is made up of 4 individuals. So we will have Matthew Turnbaugh, who is at Providence Hall, Sam Quantz at Salt Lake School District, David Bowman at Jordan District, and Jacob Johnson, who works at an organization called ETS, which is Eminent Technical Solutions. They provide IT support for a variety of charter schools throughout the state. And so are all my panelists, are we ready to go? Do you want to, maybe let's go around and you provide your own quick introduction. Start with Matt.
Hi, my name is Matt Turnbaugh. I'm out at Providence Hall in Harriman, Utah. We're pretty small. We're K through 12. So we wear a lot of hats. I am the ISO there amongst other jobs.
Thanks. Sam, quick introduction.
Sam Quantz, Chief Information Officer, Salt Lake City School District.
Okay, David.
I'm the Systems and Security Manager at Jordan School District, so I oversee our evolving security practice.
Great. And lastly, Jacob.
Hello, my name is Jacob Johnson. I am the Chief Information Officer with Eminent Technical Solutions. We're an organization based in Layton, Utah that assists educational entities, municipal governments, state governments with information security and data privacy. I worked for a number of years doing this for DoD and have traveled across the nation, helping organizations improve their information security.
Great, thank you. And hopefully you all see we've got a variety of different sizes of organizations, different experiences. Hopefully there's something here that you will look at your organization and immediately make that connection. So let's start, and hold on real quick. Can't see my questions because Zoom is blocking it. Okay, just first question. So, you know, our board rule says every LEA has to have an information security officer. What does that mean to you? And I put up, you know, for all the questions, I have a graphic here. This is one I found that discussed some of the things that at least this one survey found was desired in information security officers, but this is something you work in. How do you view it? Whoever wants to jump in first.
David, I'll jump in. This is Jake.
Yeah, thanks.
In my opinion, an information security officer, like this infographic shows so well, is there to assist in planning and implementation of policies, but also to help protect an organization's data and technologies, to help make assessments about the way forward relative to policies, and helping to identify and make apparent security risks and help make them applicable, help people understand what they are. I personally tend to give a focus towards setting a strategy and vision for an organization. Rather than saying no, it's important that we help provide guidance. We need to be a collaborator, and we need to work with organizations that we're in to help accomplish their goals relative to the policies. I mean, one way to do this, and I think is an important aspect in any information security officer, is you need to be empowering. You need to help people not just hear no, no, no. You need to help them figure out how they can accomplish what they need inside of the frameworks that we establish.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. Let's hear from the others. Sam, Matt, David.
So I think that, yeah, along those lines, absolutely. And you're an educator as well, that I lean towards that advisor as well on this infographic, is that your job is to help schools understand how to appropriately share data, protect systems, whatever that looks like. And you need to be able to look at things a little objectively and ask, okay, what's the purpose of what we're trying to accomplish here, and get to the root of what we're trying to purpose. Because a lot of times what happens is we jump to solving the problem right away, and we need to be able to take a step back and say, okay, this is a great solution. However, let's look at how this affects our security, whether it's protecting student data, employee data, or systems.
You know, and I think I would add, as part of being that, setting that strategy and vision, how that works has changed a lot in the last few years. To me, it's become more of a defensive modality. So it's a war at this point, right? So it's not it might happen, it could happen. Everything we're addressing from a security perspective has intensified over the last few years. And so instead of kind of standing on the battlement saying, this is what we're going to do and how we're going to do it, it's more like we're in the mode of having to actively repel those invaders. And so it feels a lot more in the trenches in the more recent times than it has in the past.
I really like what David said there about it being a defensive strategy. One of the things that I like to do is talk to the teachers and get them to help them to think through the whole process and what could be the end result if something did leak out. And I find that it's really helpful, so that rather than ever saying no, I actually go to the why before we get to the no.
Interesting. I like that. Get to the why before the no.
Yeah, I would add to this too. I mean, we've talked about talking to people. One other thing that I think is overlooked a lot in information security settings is listening. There's a quote by Hemingway that says, when people talk, listen completely. Most people never listen. As we sit down with our teachers and our educators and we're trying to help them, I mean, we're there for them. We don't exist for ourselves. We exist to help them educate. And so we need to listen and then collaborate to help them accomplish their end goals.
Yeah, I like that. I like the good emphasis, good points there. Like what I heard was, a lot about it's a very defensive minded thing, but also like it shouldn't be the no section, where I like let's listen, let's collaborate, but let's also focus on protecting this information as we're creating more and more of it.
Hey, David, can I add one last thing?
Yeah, please do.
One of the other things that it's worked for us, at least in working with the teachers, like what's already been mentioned before, is that we stress that emphasis that they're actually the first line of our information security defense, and they take ownership in that. And if they run across something, they're also a lot more likely to come to us and say, hey, what about this? If we're not just jumping to the conclusion and just denying everything that they ever request.
Yeah, that's great. I like that. Okay, my next question then, and this is an interesting one, I think, as you look at our rule, where our rule says LEAs are supposed to assign someone to do privacy. That's the data manager. You also need a security role. I know in some cases in LEAs, this is the same person. In other cases, they might be two different people. I just pulled this language here from the NIST privacy framework, where it's their take on what the objectives of privacy are versus the objectives of security. You can speak to this if you want, but we can talk high level. We can talk in your day-to-day experience. how does the security role in your organization differ from the privacy role? Is there overlap? Is there, or is it really different?
I think for us, one of the things that has come about as we've added that focus of the security is we had to change the way our approval process flowed a little bit, right? So a lot of us were used to the aspect of, reviewing the privacy aspect and what they do with the data and where it's going. But we were finding that we would go through that process and get it approved. But then when we did a security review of how that whatever software application was set up or how they actually use the data versus what they said, we were finding a lot of holes or concerns about it, or potential exposure to different things as a result of approval for that. And so we actually kind of reorganized our approval process in that aspect where data privacy will initially take a look at it, and if they're okay with it, then they kick it over to my group for security review to kind of give a, hey, do we have a security concerns step before we go pursue like a DPA or any of those things, because we found we were spending a lot of time and then going, oops, actually we should have skipped that altogether. So we kind of had to add the security checkbox as a expansion of our process.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I like that, knowing that, privacy law, it definitely says, if you're having a contract with a vendor, it needs to contain these elements. And that's what our DPA is for. But to sign an agreement and actually like have no security red flags, those are two very different things. That even within that vendor's organization, you might be talking to two very different people, right? The person signing the contract might be a lawyer at the organization. They might not be completely familiar with all of the security things. And so doing that check, you might realize, wait a second, yeah, they're willing to sign it, but this still seems a little sketchy. I don't know that we should be using that app. So that's interesting that you have broken them up as separate parts of your app vetting.
I think kind of like we were discussing in the breakout sessions as well. I mean, it's important to acknowledge different roles here. I personally don't feel that I have much of a role in an organization if I don't have a privacy officer. A security and privacy officer are supposed to work hand in hand together. Understanding the difference between the two and how one takes cues from the other is an important thing. Maybe in my mind, a privacy officer deals mainly with issues surrounding the question of who has the right to have access to certain information or be included in certain conversations about sensitive information or privacy data. The responsibility of an organization's security officer, on the other hand, might tend to center on the protected information itself and taking the instructions and the policies that are being created through a collaborative relationship with the privacy officer and implementing processes, systems, security measures to help secure that data. I really feel like a privacy officer and a security officer can be a great duo, and they can really work hard to help team members understand that they are capable of understanding the risks and the opportunities and that they can manage them.
Yeah, that's great. I like the idea that, they do need to work together. They, I think, have common goals when it comes to data protection, but they definitely look at it through slightly different lenses. I think privacy is often, like you were saying, more about rights, more about legality, and security is going to implement things based on that, but also has other additional goals.
A lot of times the privacy officer and what they need done gives me the direction and the why about what I'm going to implement and create. I mean, the privacy officer's role is very important in helping define the workload for the security officer.
Interesting. I like that. Now, I'm curious to hear from Sam and Matt, since I believe in both of your organizations, you cover both roles, and how does that work exactly? Are there any issues that come with that? Sam, you're in a larger organization, Salt Lake District. Matt, you're in a smaller charter school. Seeing that you wear both hats, how do you draw lines, or do you even feel like you need to draw a line?
I have zero arguments with the privacy or information security officer. I would agree. As we're talking about this, I would agree with Jacob on these lines that privacy really is about who should have access and why. And that includes ensuring that those who should have access get access in a timely manner, where the security is the how, right? So we talk about how we do that. It wouldn't be appropriate for someone who should have access to receive that access over unsecure email, for example, right? So then you would take that from we say, okay, yes, they should have access. Now the next step is, what's the best way, most secure way for them to access that information? That is over an SIS, over a secure connection, whatever that may look like.
Great. And Matt, your thoughts?
So I take care of all of our internal and external stuff. So I take care of the why and the how. But what I kind of do for a sanity check is, one, we have a procurement policy that's supposed to ensure that all app purchases go through me before they get signed off. But in addition, what I'll usually do is, once I've researched an app or something like that, that they're requesting, or some type of permission that they're requesting, I will have a sit down and have a sanity check with their administration. Say, do they really need this? Why do they need this? We talked about in the past. I was in the military, and there's a difference between having the clearance to do something and having the need to know to do something. And they really need to have both clarified and approved before I can go forth with it.
Great. Thank you for adding that. Okay, so at this point, we've talked about the what of this, what it is, how it's different from maybe how we've talked about privacy before. And I really liked what David Bowman said, that it's a war. There is so many more attacks. There's so much more defense that needs to be played. And so why don't we, we've got all of you, you're working in this. What are the biggest security challenges you face? If it's a war, what is your biggest concern? What is your biggest attack vector? And there are some examples here of lots of different ones that it could be. Maybe you're thinking of a different one. You don't have to necessarily call one out that's on the graphic here. But yeah, who wants to go first? What is the biggest security challenge you face?
I can go first on that one. I would say for Salt Lake District, our biggest security challenge is the end user, right? Not intentionally, but unintentionally. That is our biggest security threat.
Okay, so yeah, it's not, I know sometimes we think of security as like, all the networks and firewalls and very technical things. But at the end of the day, you would say it's the end user. It's a human being. It's an employee of your district. That's the biggest challenge. What do the other panelists think of that?
So
Go for it. Okay. For us, once again, it's the end user, and we can train them up and that type of stuff. But one of the biggest things we've been getting hit with are teachers' emails being spoofed, and emails being sent to our HR saying, hey, can you change my direct deposit? And we have lost money on that. So, it's, our defense was, you've got to do it in person. Anything that's personnel related, it's got to be done in person.
I think these folks are hitting on an interesting point. I think it can be summarized into a bigger issue, which is, every day, the landscape in which we operate is changing, whether we want it to or not. Criminals are not sitting down and saying, oh, let me give these guys a minute to catch their breath. Cyber terrorists are not as kind as we wish they were. And I mean, let's call a spade a spade. We're dealing with people that are terrorists. They want to take the data, which is worth money and has a real fungible value to them, and and extort us. And so, as people mentioned earlier, we have team members inside of our organization. The question we need to ask is, how do we make these lessons learned, these risks resonate at a personal level with these individuals? I would submit to everybody in this group that we need to make this a bigger part of our daily operations training, little notes that go out, making people more aware. It doesn't have to be anything big or complicated, but keeping it present in front of people helps. Professional development is not something that occurs 1 hour in a room one time a year. If that's our mindset, we're never going to solve this problem. It's got to be omnipresent.
Well, I think at that point, one of the things that we look at is, while the end users are one of the biggest challenges, one of the things that we're trying to address is how we make that institutional or management culture change, right? To help the things like that, like it to be daily present and to be more aware of that. And, you know, we've kicked around things from, you know, Super Duper Dave runs around with a cape in the schools yelling data privacy is important, to, you know, having a conversation with our cabinet and board members about what its importance looks like. Sometimes there's a real value, though, as you bring in important partnerships to help us do that. So one of the things that's made a big difference for us is we went through a process to do a pen test audit with UEN, and that provided us some very good working points and talking points from a leadership business perspective about how we wanted to address some of those things. And lots of them are really big rocks, because we're ultimately educators and that's our focus. And so anytime we're going to potentially interrupt educating through data privacy or data security or make a teacher's life harder or a student, we have to be very careful and considerate about what those changes look like. But the partnership of a formalized process of an audit has helped us to really sit down and make some strategic decisions about how we can work on those things and kind of our roadmap on how to get to them. And it's a long process, right? It's not, you know, it's not a, hey, here's the list and we're just going to work down through the punch list. There's a lot of considerations and partnerships as we go through that, but it gives us a framework to fit that too.
Yeah, great. Excellent.
I would say one thing we could do is also take the stigma off of when somebody makes a mistake. Find a way to learn from our mistakes. Hey, if I clicked a link in an email or something happened, it wasn't ideal. We got to find a framework in which we can use those as teaching opportunities, because if you're walking along a trail and you trip into a pit and you're 10 feet at the bottom, if you were at the top, would you not warn the next person walking on the trail not to fall into the same pit you walked on? I mean, I guess sometimes we don't talk about the things that are going on in an open enough way.
Yeah, and I really like that point at the end there where, you know, because we are talking about the end users and they're the challenge. They're the ones, you know, you can have the strongest defenses and most expensive security in the world, but if an end user makes a mistake that, you know, when there's a professional, you know, you went as far as to say the word terrorist, right? There is a professional who is skilled in social engineering. They're skilled at tricking people, and you fall for it. Like, you know, to err is human. We all make mistakes, and you shouldn't, you know, be stigmatized for that. You should, like exactly like you were saying, like you should warn the next person. And I think a lot of this is really going to come to that question of training, right? If the end users are our biggest vulnerability, we hit on some different things. But what I want to hear is, you know, specifically within your LEA or the organizations you work with, how do you handle that training? You know, Jacob, you already kind of alluded to this a little bit, that it's not just a once a year professional development thing that needs to be kept present in people's minds. I think, and I'm interested to hear, because we have some very different sized organizations here. You know, I'm sure like Matt at Providence, you can probably fit your entire school in one room. Jordan District, that's probably a little bit harder, but that's what I want to hear from all of you. How are you currently handling training, or how would you like to handle training if things were may be able to go your way a little bit more.
So
You know,
at Providence, what we do the annual training for the privacy and data governance, which is a requirement to do. But in addition to that, I get emails from CISA, with different threats that are out there, and if there's something that I can simplify and say, hey, even if this affects you on your home computer or something like that, here's something that you could do to prevent XYZ to happen. One of our librarians, she does another thing called Techie Thursdays, and sometimes we'll throw some stuff in there to train them on various threats that are out there. We'll talk about social engineering. We'll talk about phishing. We'll talk about spear phishing or vishing or whatever a common threat is at that point. And then for those who don't know, every October is cybersecurity month. And so, we tried to push a reminder there. So we're always trying to do something small to keep things at the forefront.
Yeah, it just real quick, Matt, because you used an acronym I'm not sure everyone would know. So the CISA, you could just
Yes.
quickly say who that is. Should others want to get updates from them?
So CISA, they're part of the Department of Homeland Security. You can just Google them and they'll see us CISA and it'll pop right at the top. They're the ones that they're kind of the brainchild behind the CIS framework as well.
So at Jordan, one of the things we go against is just the line to get in front of our educators and share training or information. It's a big one. And so one of the things that we've had to focus on is we really haven't been able to get the right traction on a more frequent appearance. So we've been working on trying to increase excitement or engagement in those annual or semi-annual type opportunities we get. So one of the things we've done is instead of the cybersecurity type training being packaged into the data privacy video or training that happens annually, we've made it its own standalone thing. And we've used student actors to help with that, which gets a little bit more engagement on our videos. Our director actually came up with a great idea that we're doing this year, where once a year they get all of the teachers in a giant expo center so that we can have booths and do a little bit of training. And we've bought like 1,000 Spot It games that has like a little fish on it with a hook. And in order for the educator to get the game for free, they got to come read our little flyer on phishing email, right? So we're giving a gift, right, to get them to pay attention to what we're trying to tell them. And that's one of the things that's kind of more unique. That's been kind of a fun idea that we're excited to do to kind of help engage that appeal. So essentially, we've just focused on increasing the quality or effectiveness of those few chances we do get.
Great. Then Sam or Jacob?
Yeah, from our perspective, we have annual trainings as well. Primary e-learning. We suffer from the same challenge that David talked about of getting in front of people enough. There's enough surveys and there's enough newsletters that go out that are just randomly spammed to all of our staff that it's really easy to just ignore those. So we look for effective opportunities to have these conversations. For example, yesterday we had our office staff, they have into their written agreement that they have an annual training as well. And so we did some training on student data privacy, where David, you became a celebrity, just so you know.
Great.
Yes. So those are things that we do. Additionally, we've started over the last couple of months where we are sending out our own phishing scams. And so we're able to capture those who fall for them a little bit easier and provide training on that. People don't really know that we're doing it or when we're doing it. We just randomly do it. And then we work to provide training in those areas that we see need that training.
Great.
Sam hit on some great things there. I mean, the one thing I would add is every director here, every principal, every person who fills a leadership role, try and help us who are trying to help you find 5 minutes a month that we can get out a little message. And our guarantee or our promise to you is that we're going to distill it down into easy to understand lessons, things that are applicable to end users. I think the example also that Sam gave, we've done a lot of scenarios and testing where we're trying to help people find the pitfall. And if they're going to stumble into it, it's better that we be at the bottom of the pit than the bad guy be at the bottom of the pit. We do a lot of phishing scams. It's been very gratifying to me to see how drastically that has improved in a lot of our schools where we were having a lot of people click links or disclose information. It's gone to practically nothing. And we're seeing the reverse happen now, where if people have concerns about emails or other things, they're not clicking on it, they're not making the mistake, they're sending us a screenshot, they're notifying us, they're asking questions. They're becoming more active participants versus passive victims.
Oh, I like that. Let's get them all to be more active participants in privacy and security and instead of passive victims. Okay, another area I want to talk about end users then is the credentials, how they get into systems. And I have heard so many different things. Hopefully people are familiar with this cartoon by XKCD about password complexity and how, a lot of the practices, that's the summary at the end. Through 20 years of effort, we've successfully trained everyone to use passwords that are hard for humans to remember, but are easy for computers to guess, which would then be subject to a brute force attack if someone really wanted to get into the system. I'll also point out that passwords are often what an attacker is looking for. They're looking for credentials to be able to get into more and more valuable systems, be able to get into your school's financial system, be able to start writing checks directly to them. And so what I want to hear is, how do you handle passwords? What do you recommend? What would you suggest to another LEA that they do? And also, has there been any pushback? Have there been any problems? And how have you addressed that?
So I'll start on this one because we've gone through a process fairly recently about this, and we had a lot of very passionate discussion meetings about what we wanted, let alone we were going to try to get approved. And one of the things that we found that was interesting is the CIS guidelines and kind of how we've been trained up used to have very specific things, right? Like your password character count should be X, and you should reset it on Y frequency and Z, whatever reason. And one of the things that we had to kind of move ourselves emotionally past is this whole, how often do we reset the password thing? And one of the things that the CIS updated guidelines have come out with is a little bit more of awareness about the study of the behavior when you require a lot of password resets or extreme complexities. And at the end of the day, we actually simplified a lot of our rules. So we don't require resets as often. It doesn't require, special character, uppercase, lowercase, 10,000 different things. But what we did ultimately was increase the length. Because the research shows that length and teaching passphrases was the most effective way to increase password security. One of the challenges that we ran into that was kind of interesting is that we had a lot of pushback on the concept that making longer passwords was going to be too difficult for our younger students, or it was just going to be an interruption for teachers or anyone else to have to type in really long passwords. So one of our cabinet members actually volunteered a group of kindergartners at her school for us to do some, complex password requirement testing with, and the kindergartners knocked it out of the park. So then the conversation with the rest of the groups were, hey, look, the kindergartners can handle the new password policy and so can you. And so that actually kind of helped us get that across the line in terms of, look, if our youngest students can handle this, so can you. And so that's been one of the things that's made it a lot more successful policy. My help desk really appreciates the not introduction of the, haiku length and all these different things that have to be in a password. It allows them to give good basic education to a user when they need a password reset on what it should look like. And we feel a lot more comfortable even when we audit our password database from breached passwords or known ineffective passwords to not be used any longer.
Great. What's everyone else doing with passwords?
I would jump in here and say one of the things that we're pushing for on this is kind of how do you eat an elephant approach. It's going to take just one big bite at a time. As we go through, we've looked at kind of the systems our schools are using. We're making a big push wherever possible to move over to multi-factor authentication. I mean, that goes a long ways to taking any password and reinforcing it because it involves multiple tokens. I mean, sure, you could guess a person's password, but if you don't have access to the second token, it doesn't do you a lot of good. We're working hard with our schools to move towards single sign-on or centralized directories, such as Active Directory, in order to help make their lives easier. Because one thing we can do is we can create password policies, but look at all the systems everybody's using. The more we can help consolidate and the more secure we can make our passwords and streamlined, I think people are going to have a better success story there. I would say also organizations need to encourage better password management at the organization level. Directors, principals, leadership, you have a lot of people in your organization doing a lot of things, using a lot of passwords. You're not aware of what they are. A lot of our schools, we encourage them to come up with a password management policy to help them utilize tools that are industry standard to organize and manage those passwords. I'll end on this note. This is my one joke for the whole meeting. I mean, passwords are like underwear. We need to change them regularly. We don't need to leave them on our desk, and we're not supposed to be loaning them out to anybody. You wouldn't believe how many times we go in and do an audit with UEN or just spot checks, and we find passwords still being written on sticky notes or left on screens or under keyboards. It's happening. We need to, if we see that, police inside of our own organizations.
Excellent. That underwear, that's a great little sound clip if no one else remembers anything from this day. And then Matt and Sam.
So we, Providence Hall, I've got a password policy where it needs to be a minimum of 9 characters. We do ask them to change it every 60 days. We do have the password complexity turned on in a Google domain. That's where we run everything through. We do mandate 2-factor authentication that people have to use. One of the other things that we do to kind of ease the pain of the multiple passwords and things like that, we do use SSO when we can, but we also we're fine with them using a legitimate password manager like LastPass, so that they can focus on just remembering one password.
Great. And yes, we have recommended in the past, and Greg and I several years ago made a video talking about how to get into, specifically in this case, LastPass, but talks about password managers. So that's something you could share with others as well. And then Sam, what are your thoughts on passwords?
Yeah, a lot of the things that have been discussed are what we're doing. It's just a challenge, right? If you increase complexity, you introduce new challenges. And then on the other side of it, it really doesn't matter how long or how complex the password is if the end user gives it away. And so for us, the thing has been, we still have an 8-character password length, but we have implemented for our staff at least 2-factor authentication across the board. And so, and then all of our systems are moving to SSO to be able to take advantage of that, because not all systems have built-in 2-factor authentication. So if you can introduce your SSO, that will build that in as well. So yeah, those are the areas that we work on. We've also gotten away from we used to have a 90-day password change requirement. We've exchanged that. I more offered that up as a compromise so I could get 2-factor authentication across the board. Change your password less, but you still have to do this. And that's been a challenge. 2-factor authentication implementation has been a little bit of a challenge. We get some pushbacks from teachers because it interrupts their instructional time to get their password. We have teachers that forget their phones. We offer fobs for teachers. We don't pay for teachers' cell phones, and so we allow them to use their cell phone as a convenience. However, if they don't want to use their personal cell phone for that, they can. We have a fob for them that will just attach to their keychain, and I'll give them their 6-digit code that they can use. So,
okay, yeah. So hearing lots of variety of passwords, and I like what you said at the end there, Sam, of trade-offs, essentially, where it's like you wanted to, you decrease the amount of time it takes for password resets in order to get 2-factor, and obviously, you know, making compromises and those sorts of things is going to be needed, because at the end of the day, you're asking people to do something, and if it's unrealistic, then they just won't do it, and then you'll have a whole bunch of things happening under your radar that are concerning. So just we are almost out of time. I want this last question. This is almost kind of more of a final thought sort of thing. I think a lot of the people in this session likely do not have as much experience working with security. A lot of LEAs are maybe not as far along as all of you are. So, you know, what would you recommend for someone just getting started? We talked about the biggest risks. We talked about some of the things to do with end users. Just real quickly, let's go around, like no more than 30 seconds each. What would you recommend for someone who is just getting started?
Pick a framework or a structure, make a list, and just start taking it in bite-sized pieces.
yeah,
I would add to that, and I'd say identify a champion in your school, somebody who gets it. Bring in an outside party to work alongside that champion, like an ETS or UETN. If you bring us in at ETS, we'll help you create a 5-year technology plan with incremental steps, and we'll help you identify low-hanging fruit. We'll start with the easy stuff and work our way up. You got to have a plan. You can't work it without a plan.
Great.
I would say make note of what are you actually doing now, and then compare that to the CIS framework. And it is a huge elephant, but it's actually broken out where you can do little bits at a time. Yeah, it's 18 steps, but there's implementation groups where you just take small bites and it'll work its way out.
I agree.
Yeah, take your framework, whatever that is, CIS, NIST, whatever you choose. And then I would also say start getting feedback from your schools, your end users about what their experience is. When you understand that, you're better able to help them understand why some of these things are being implemented.
Okay, thank you for that final thought, Sam. And for all of our panelists, I thought this was a really good conversation. I hope there was a lot of value, some immediate takeaways for the entire audience, all of the participants. It's 11:55, so actually we are going to forego asking questions directly to the panelists, but I'm sure, you know, if you were to reach out to them via email, you could go that route for any questions you have for them. We want to close up this training now with a couple of action items for you to be aware of. So one of them is, and this is something Katie referenced earlier, we didn't have enough time to go into the full detail of what the privacy compliance review is going to look like. Actually, last year it was the same thing, except in, I think it was September, we held a webinar where we went into like all of the detail of how it was going to work. We hope to offer that to you earlier this year, which is why that is going to be this May. So please, if you have not done so yet, you can register at the, I think, John, you've probably put the link, or you could put the link in the chat directly. If you are not already on our newsletter, we recommend that you sign up for that. That's where we generally monthly will send out updates and notices for some of the content that we're providing. And then one of the other things that, you know, please, please, please treat this as your exit ticket before you go. please complete our post-training survey. This is something we rely on every year when we complete one of these trainings. We go through and we see how we did. We want to understand which sessions you found of value, what sessions we didn't offer that you would find of value, because this will go into content we produce in the future, particularly in the fall when we do this training again. Yeah, so that's speaking of the newsletter, so I already kind of went into that. We also want to highlight some of the resources we have that do directly relate to some of the things we talked about here. So particularly when it comes to privacy, the privacy compliance check, we have our data managers Canvas course. We will be updating that very soon regarding what we will be looking at for the coming school year. What's in there right now will mostly relate to last year's check. We have created a cybersecurity course that was intended to be given to teachers and that meets the recommendations of what a cybersecurity training should be in the CIS controls. We call it Agent FERPA. So you could use those videos. Maybe again, like if it's like, oh, I just got 5 minutes a month. I believe all of them, each video is under 5 minutes. So that might be a good thing to share. We've mentioned the CIS controls a couple of times. If you've never looked at those, we've provided a link to it. And also, since we last met in the fall, or particularly in March, we held a webinar that related to records retention that was specifically for our records officers and LEAs. So we have the link there if you missed it and you'd like to watch it again or watch it for the first time. We've mentioned the Student Data Privacy Consortium Learn platform. So there's information there if you would like to use those. And then also we have a lot of videos. This video will be going probably sometime within the next 24 hours on our YouTube channel. That's where all of the content we have created lives. Like and subscribe, as they say on YouTube. And I also want to make everyone aware of things we will be doing in the near future. So at the end of this month, that actually the last Thursday of every month, members of the Student Data Privacy Consortium Alliance, there is a call to get together, discuss issues, provide a little bit of training. That's something that John runs. So if you've not been involved with that, reach out to John. We mentioned in May, we will be doing that. Katie will be doing the privacy compliance review webinar that will also be recorded if you're not available at that time. And then over the summer, we're going to be taking our show on the road a little bit. So in the beginning of June, we'll be at the, that's the Charter School Conference, the UACPS. We'll be at the UETN Tech Summit in Murray at the end of June. And then at the Rural Schools Conference at the beginning of July, we'll have couple of different presentations. And we're also happy to announce that we're planning next fall, next November, to move this back into an in-person format. So as of right now, this is a save the date. We are planning 3 locations throughout the state. We will have one at the Weber School District offices, one at the, I don't remember the name of it in Springville, but the one center where they always hold things in Nebo School District. So we'll have 2 along the Wasatch Front there. And then we will be taking a trip down to Southern Utah. And there's a location at Washington School District that we have reserved. Okay, it is 12 o'clock. So I do want to let everyone who wants to go take their lunch right now do so. Thank you very much for your attendance. Were there any questions in the chat that we haven't addressed throughout? John, if you can.
I believe that some of the panelists have been able to discuss with David Bowman was able to reach out. There were some questions about best practices. If you do have lingering questions, please always reach out to us at privacy@schools.utah.gov. And like David said, this will be posted on our website and in our newsletter within the next couple of hours or days.
Great. And again, one last reminder, because Katie put it in the chat also, please, if you've not done so, please complete the post-training survey. It is extremely helpful for us in planning these kinds of events. And if not, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much for coming. I hope it was useful. Bye.